The largest rogue trading position in financial history, 50 billion euros, was built by a single junior trader at one of France's biggest banks. When it collapsed, it almost broke the world economy. He never took a cent for himself. Jerome Kerviel grew up in Pont-l'Abbé, a small town in Brittany. He joined Societe Generale around 2000, not as a trader but in the compliance department. That part of the bank monitors trades and makes sure the numbers match. He spent several years learning how the internal systems worked. He understood which checks were automated, which were manual, and where the gaps between them were. In 2005, he transferred to a trading desk that dealt in European stock index futures. The work was technical and high volume. Every position on the desk was supposed to be hedged. Each bet in one direction was balanced by one in the other, so the overall risk stayed low. Kerviel began doing the opposite. He placed large one-way bets on the direction of European stock markets. Then he entered fictitious trades into the bank's systems to make it look like those bets were balanced. On screen, his book appeared safe, but in reality, the bank was carrying massive, unauthorized risk. His years in compliance gave him a specific advantage. He knew what the monitoring systems looked for and when they looked for it. He knew which documents would satisfy a routine question. He knew how to adjust a record so a flagged trade would drop off the alert list. That knowledge was tested regularly. The bank's systems generated alerts on unusual activity, and several times, compliance staff sent queries about trades on his book. Each time, Kerviel created or modified records to explain the discrepancy before the review went further. He answered questions calmly, provided documentation that looked correct, and the inquiry closed. One alert resolved, and he went back to building the position. This happened more than once. Each close call could have ended the scheme, but each time the explanation he provided fit what the system expected. In one case, a compliance officer questioned a large position that appeared to lack a matching hedge. Kerviel produced a record of a counterparty trade that turned out to be fictitious. The officer accepted the documentation and moved on. The controls were checking boxes, and Kerviel knew exactly which boxes to check. Through all of it, Kerviel did not behave like a man hiding 50 billion euros in unauthorized risk. He came to work at the same desk every morning and ate lunch with colleagues. He left in the evening like everyone else on the floor. No one reported unusual behavior or signs of stress. He did not spend lavishly or change his lifestyle. The gap between his daily routine and the scale of what he was concealing was enormous. That gap was part of what kept him hidden. By late 2007, his secret positions had generated large profits. That created a problem the compliance system was not designed to solve. When a desk appears to be making money, internal controls tend to ask fewer questions. The people who run risk monitoring are reluctant to challenge a unit that appears profitable. Kerviel was not operating in a vacuum. He was operating inside a structure that had reasons not to look too closely. By January 2008, the hidden exposure had reached roughly 50 billion euros. To put that in context, it exceeded the market value of many major European companies. It was concentrated on one desk under one trader with no authorization behind it. Then the system caught something it could not explain away. In mid-January, compliance staff flagged trades with documentation that did not match records held by outside counterparties. This time, the discrepancy could not be closed with internal adjustments. The other side of the trade simply did not exist. Over the weekend of the 18th to the 20th of January, investigators worked through the records. What they found was worse than anyone expected. The bank had one weekend to understand the full scope before markets opened on Monday. The hedges, the offsetting positions that were supposed to keep the risk contained, were fictitious. The entries were in the system, but no real trades had been made with any outside counterparty. The safety net the bank believed was in place did not exist. What they were looking at was not an accounting error or a processing delay. It was a naked directional bet on the European stock market built by one trader with nothing behind it. The scale of what they found was difficult to process. The position was large enough to threaten the stability of the entire institution, and it was fully exposed to a market that was already falling. From 21st to 23rd January, Societe Generale had 3 days to unwind the entire position. The bank sold off billions of euros in stock index futures while the market was already falling. The timing was brutal. Markets were already in a steep decline. The forced selling added pressure to an environment that was already under strain. On January 22nd, the U.S. Federal Reserve made an emergency interest rate cut, one of the largest in decades. Whether the unwinding contributed to the broader sell-off that week has been debated ever since, but the overlap in timing is clear. On January 24th, the bank made the public announcement. The unauthorized trades had produced a loss of 4.9 billion euros. The bank launched an emergency capital raise to stabilize itself, and the damage hit shareholders from every direction at once. Shareholders were hit by the loss, the share price collapse, and the dilution from new shares. The announcement landed in the middle of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Societe Generale's name became part of the larger story of institutional failure that defined 2008. 2 days later, Kerviel was taken into custody. He admitted to falsifying records, but contested the narrative that he had acted alone. He said the bank knew. His consistent position was that his superiors knew the scale of risk being taken and tolerated it while it was profitable. The bank rejected that entirely and called him a sophisticated fraudster who had deliberately circumvented every safeguard. But regulators complicated that framing. The French Banking Commission fined Societe Generale its maximum penalty for failures in internal controls. The regulator did not find that the bank had knowingly permitted the trades, but it concluded that the systems had been inadequate. In 2010, a Paris court convicted Kerviel on all charges. He was ordered to pay 4.9 billion euros in damages. The full trading loss placed entirely on one person. 6 years later, the Versailles Court of Appeal cut that figure to 1 million euros. The court cited the bank's own control failures as a contributing factor. The gap between those two numbers tells the story. Courts spent 6 years deciding how to divide responsibility. The Kerviel case exposed a structural problem that extends beyond one bank. The controls that are supposed to prevent unauthorized risk depend on one assumption. The people inside the system do not understand how to defeat it. Kerviel understood exactly how. The bank had trained him in those systems before it gave him a trading seat. A 4.9 billion euro loss was initially blamed entirely on one man. By the time the courts finished, the fault had been formally split. That shift from rogue trader to shared failure is the part of this story that still matters. Enjoyed this story? Leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Now you know.